PL what's poppin'? Let's go into some Spider-Man today, right? Click. It is Spider-Pig though, right? Hey.
Miles Morales is about to get new powers and learn a lesson about respecting what you've been given. As with many heroes, something incredible has to happen for him to learn a new ability. And today I'm bringing you the audio drama of Miles Morales 1 through 5. This book came out in 2022 and it leads into a crazy Carnage storyline. But let's start at the beginning with his new powers. This is Comic Storian and I make audio dramas of comic books so that you know what to put into your collection. Let's go. It's been a while since Miles took a step back to catch his breath from all of the recent stuff that has been going on in his life. There were clones, the Spider-Man Beyond Corporation, and not to mention Peter Parker going full weirdo mode. But even with all of that, there's hardly been a moment of rest. And the villains of New York surely hadn't taken a break. As a speeding armored truck barrels down the streets of Brooklyn, Scorpion swipes away police cars asking, "What's all the fuss about? Can't a guy make an armed withdrawal?" However, when the truck begins racing towards a young girl on the road, it's Miles Morales who swings in, giving Scorpion a kick to the face while swooping in to rescue the girl from being hit, telling her, "You know, you really should look both ways before crossing." After setting her down, he asks if she's good. She tells him yes. And he tells her that he loves to hear it. "Now I gotta go beat up Scorpion. Be easy." He quickly jumps back into action, webbing up Scorpion, stating that the daylight robbery is pretty wild, even for him. And Scorpion says that he was gonna take a bus, but he was out of fare. So I figured why not knock over a bank real quick. As Miles tries to lock him down, Scorpion lashes out with his tail, cracking Miles on the side of his head, and he manages to wrap it around Miles' neck. Scorpion says that he isn't the original Spider-Man, but killing you is going to be just as good. Plus, that suit looks better anyway. Thanks, but there's something else you should know about me. Miles' fingers begin to spark up. Oh boy. And then Scorpion feels the full power of a venom blast surging through his entire body. As he hits the ground stunned, Miles says that he has one more trick up his sleeve, and he begins to web Scorpion head to toe, throwing him into the armored truck. As Scorpion lays there groaning, Miles hangs upside down, telling him that next time, he might want to just take the subway. But another voice chimes in, stating that he may want to rethink giving out live advice, because as far as she's concerned, he's about 3 seconds away from getting his butt hauled off for violating the Powers Act. Agent Gao holds out her PDNY badge as the other officers secure Scorpion, and she tells Miles that she's going to give him a friendly tip. He really doesn't want to mess with them. "Yeah, I've heard all about you guys. You crack skulls, push around folks looking after their own streets. Heard people who look like me get it the worst. That about right?" Gao then asks, "At what cost?" Miles wants to know what does she even mean. She motions to the destruction that he caused with his battle with Scorpion. "Look at this! Destruction of private property, destruction of public property, destruction of municipal property. Your single act of vigilantism cost the city more than whatever money Scorpion would have gotten from the bank. Money that was insured, by the way. You did manage to save a girl's life, and that at least counts for something. But consider this your first and last warning, because there won't be a second one. Do you copy, Spider-Man?" Miles webs up, swinging away. Copy. Later, over at Brooklyn Visions Academy, Miles' school, he sneaks into the boys' bathroom and Genki tosses him his civilian clothes, telling him that he didn't know it was possible for someone to be this late. One more tardy and the teacher's going to bury him. Miles begins to change, telling him to cut him some slack. He had to deal with Scorpion and some mean agent lady who yelled at him. Just say he got stuck in the bathroom stalling it or something. And as Miles takes off his mask, Genki says, "Well, not with a shiner like that." Moments later, in the class, the teacher then says that he wishes he could detail how bad this is, Mr. Morales. That he has heard this song a dozen times, so rather than making excuses, he would like to see him and Mr. Lee here on time. Both Miles and Genki lower their heads, apologizing. And the teacher asks why does he think that he's better than his classmates. Miles insists that he isn't better than them, but the teacher would like to know why is it that he thinks he doesn't have to follow the same rules as everyone. Is it because he's here because he won the lottery? That because of that he gets a special privilege? Because he won the lottery getting into the school, someone else had to lose. He should be more grateful. A lot of kids would kill to be in his shoes and walk these halls. So sit down. Miles snaps back, asking, "What? I get condescended by you?" The teacher slams his book shut. "A few days of suspension will help you grow in your appreciation for this school. You can head to the office and inform them." Miles scoffs, grabbing his bag, and he steps out of the class as his phone pings him with a message from Tiana. She asks if they're good, and Miles tries to think of something to tell her about what he's going through, and he tells her, "Yeah, just going through some stuff. I'll hit you up later, just need a breather." As he leaves, he decides to take the long way home, swinging his way through the city when his phone begins to ring. He sighs that they're getting faster with this stuff, and as he answers, his mom and dad state that they're pretty sure that he knows why they're calling. Anything he wants to talk about. Miles tells them that there's been a lot going on lately, and it's like he's losing himself. Stuff that was easy before he can barely handle. The Spider-Man stuff, school, relationships. It's all like he's getting buried by everything, and he's just scrambling to stay afloat. He just wants to do good. He just wants to be good. But it's like he's getting pushed back from everywhere. Jeff and Rio tell him it's okay. He knew things weren't going to be easy, and that's why he has to lean on them to focus on the important things, that he needs to not rush. But don't misunderstand, he's still grounded when he gets home. He wipes his face, telling himself that it's all going to pass, and that's when he hears a buzz coming from the distance. When he reaches the source of the sound, he sees Bumbler breaking into a building, stating that he loves the upgrades. "But I can't say the same about you breaking and entering." Bumbler spins back, firing his gun. "That was a reflex! Please don't hold it against me." Miles dodges, telling him that it happens, and then he swings both feet towards, knocking Bumbler into the building. "You should be careful, because just because a bee is down, it doesn't mean it's out. Ultimate attack, honey punch!" As Bumbler swings, he hits Miles, launching him across the warehouse, and Bumbler looks at his hands. Holy crap, she wasn't lying about these upgrades. Miles then begins to get back up, telling him, "All right, I'm officially over this." And he begins punching Bumbler over and over, with each hit hitting harder and harder. With a bloody and bruised face, Bumbler begins to yell, "You won, man! Just stop hitting me!" And as Miles pulls back for another swing, he pauses, realizing that perhaps his anger is getting the best of him. So he webs up Bumbler, telling him that he's sorry, but he's got to run. His heart isn't in this right now. Meanwhile, elsewhere, the girl that Miles rescued is walking down the street, and an older homeless woman on the sidewalk calls out, asking how was her day, Raneem. Raneem tells her, "Fantastic, Spider-Man saved her, how lucky was that?" And the woman laughs. "Is that why you're glowing?" Raneem says that she has no idea, but she walks into her store, locking the door. She walks to the back where there's a dozen monitors all set up, all with images of Miles, both in and out of costume. Raneem looks at them, stating that he should enjoy the time he has left, because those of them who were left behind are finally going to have their day in the sun, Miles Morales. The next morning, Miles begins his day of punishment by doing the laundry, and as he begins to fold his clothes, there's a tap on his window. He looks back to see Tiana outside, asking does he have anything to say after ducking her last night. Miles lets her in, telling her that it isn't like that, he just got busy. And she tells him that a text would have been nice. She wants to know what's gotten into him lately. He's been so squirrely. He knows that he can talk to her. Miles says that he's just having a hard time is all. He's been feeling lost and doesn't know what to do. She tells him that she gets it, but he should try talking. Miles says that he's been thinking a lot about what happens if someone close to him gets hurt or something. Him and Tiana can handle themselves, but Genki is different, you know? Tiana begins to climb back out of the window, telling him, "Got it. You're having an existential crisis, and you think that absolves you from being a selfish jerk." Miles interrupts her, telling her that she's right. He has been a jerk for a little while. Just give him some time to collect his thoughts, and he'll hit her up tonight, all right? She flies off, telling him, process how he processes. But she isn't the type to just sit around waiting for him. Miles sighs, falling back to his bed as she leaves, looking at the hole in his costume, beginning to wonder about Bumbler's most recent upgrades. He heads back out to where he fought Bumbler to see if he can get some clues, and as he sneaks in, he hears something rattle and quickly webs it up. Except as he attempts to web it, it's grabbed and he's pulled in as a voice tells him, "Is that so?" He looks up to see Misty Knight, who tells him that she is trained with enough spider folk to see through web shooter tricks. "You're the Brooklyn Spider-Man, right? I saw your name in the Beyond files." Miles tells her thanks, but not to be rude. "But why are you here?" She tells him that she's on the clock. But the quick of it is, a bunch of data centers have been hit, mostly stolen electronics and processors. Nothing big enough to get on people's radars, but enough for a private company to hire her and see what's up. So, is it your handiwork? Miles looks up from the wreckage of the previous fight, telling her that he did get into a fight with Bumbler. Bumbler's pretty harmless, but he got a serious upgrade, so maybe there's a connection. And since Misty's looking into it, Miles asks if maybe they should team up. The other Spider-Man can totally vouch for me. She sighs, telling him that he can tag along, but it's only a temporary team-up. At that moment, Miles' phone rings with Genki and Tiana asking if everything's alright, and Misty asks if he's good. Miles ignores both of them and says that he'll deal with it later. So, with that, Misty Knight and Miles begin their detective work. But barely an hour passes before Miles is so bored. At that moment, the thieves actually arrive, so the two of them spring into action. However, no sooner do they follow the crooks to start the battle than they find the crooks already having been taken out. Misty looks at one of the men stating that whatever happened, it happened quick, Spider-Man, and quiet. Poor guy still has his safety on. She looks at another one and realizes that the stab wounds look a little familiar. But at that moment, Spider-Man's spider sense goes off and Scorpion rushes in, knocking the two of them down. "This is gonna go a lot more different this time, punk!" Scorpion stands up, stating that he should thank him before he kills him. "Because of our fight, I got some nice new upgrades, free of charge. The little birdie told me all I had to do was put you down." As the two of them get up, they're knocked back down, and Miles asks if they should call for backup, with Misty telling him that they are the backup. And while Miles and Misty deal with a superpowered Scorpion elsewhere, Tiana is sitting on a roof awaiting a text from Miles. As she gets ready to leave, there's a ping from him stating, "Today was crazy." Tiana says no problem, meet at the usual spot, and Miles responded with, "Turn around." She laughs, stating that he's really trying his luck, but then a female's voice tells him, "Luck's got nothing to do with it. I'm just simply here to take what is owed." Raneem flies in on a disc-like drone with several more following closely behind. Raneem then uses the drones as steps to launch her attacks, as Tiana says that she doesn't know what robot circus Raneem flunked out of, but she can't wait to beat the answer out of her. Tiana quickly begins to gain the upper hand, but as the woman is thrown off balance, she activates a device on her wrist, and as Tiana goes to fly in, her wings suddenly stop responding. Tiana comes crashing down onto the ground, with Raneem jumping down, stating that she shouldn't underestimate her. She's about to make every single one of them know it as well. Later, Raneem begins to explain her upbringing and her reason for hating Miles so much. You see, her parents were immigrants that traveled to the States in search of the American dream. They were simply people with a simple life, but eventually she was added to that. At a young age, she had shown that she had a certain talent for when it came to electronics. Her parents worked hard to provide, and she hadn't a care in the world. Life was good, until it wasn't. Her mother had gotten sick, and even going to the doctors, there was nothing that they could do. After that, her father was never the same. He pretended, but the light in his eyes was gone. She did what she could to help out in the shop, but it wasn't enough. And then one day, her father said that she should put her gifts to a good use and apply for Brooklyn Visions. She planned it all out. She could be chosen and could be recognized for all of her hard work, for all of the hard work that her parents did. But, like many things in life, it wasn't fair. And her entire life was reduced to a bet that she'd lost. Her entire future was decided on a lottery, a damn gamble. And you know who won? Who took what was hers? Miles Morales. Tiana scoffs, stating that she had a messed up childhood. "My condolences, welcome to the club. Trauma doesn't give you a license to inflict it on others." Raneem turns back, stating that she's not naive enough to think that she is the only person who had it tough. She's just one of the few that is brave enough to fix it. Her future was taken from her, and she will set it right. Meanwhile, back with Miles and Misty, Scorpion is swinging his tail. "Last time you got lucky, but I'm a brand new man now." Misty then says that the next lesson in detective work is to always keep them talking. These dudes love to spill the beans, Miles. Miles told her that the other Spidey says that too. Scorpion spins around using his tail to launch Misty across the warehouse, but as she gets up, she notices something that may have been left behind in the last fight. Miles does what he can to keep Scorpion away, until Misty opens fire with the Bumbler's gun that he left there. And then with a combined effort of Miles and Misty, they take out Scorpion. Gao then shows up, looking over at Miles, stating that he doesn't remember what she told him last time, does he? Miles looks at her. "You're not going to believe this, but I'm actually with Misty. Well, not with her, I'm working with her." So then Misty and Gal begin to argue over whether or not Miles should be involved, what's actually detective work, and what Misty has jurisdiction over. But eventually it ends with Misty threatening to call the mayor, so Gal backs off. He eventually gets a call from Genki, and he heads over to where Genki's located, but as he arrives at the location, something feels off. And that's when his spider sense begins to blare. Miles barely jumps out of the way, avoiding one of Raneem's flying discs, slamming into the wall, only to get struck by the others. He's flung over to the next building, and Raneem says that he isn't looking good. It's time to bring him back to his feet. Miles shouts at her, asking where's Genki, but the discs continue to knock him over. After being pinned to the ground, Miles looks up to see Raneem there, and he asks, "Who are you?" She tells him that she's the one that was left behind, the discarded accumulation of her parents' wildest hopes and dreams. She is the one lost among the scramble, another body lost to the rabble. Raneem then calls out that this is going to be Miles' reckoning, and Miles demands to know how she knows his real name. She tells him that she knows a lot about him, like he's the first child of Jeff Davis and Rio Morales, the Spider-Man and Brooklyn Vision Academy's most mediocre student. She slashes with a blade of electricity, nearly missing Miles' head. Miles quickly tries to retaliate by webbing her up, but the discs whirl around, deflecting the webs, allowing Raneem to swipe and cut Miles in the chest. She stands back up. You've coasted for too long, taken the spotlight, accolades, and opportunities, while the ones displaced were left with scraps. What are you talking about? Miles shouts. But Raneem tells him the lottery, his placement at the academy, the advancements that granted him and his family the chance that he was given. It should have been given to someone who actually needed it. It's not my fault I won the stupid thing. I didn't even ask for it. I can't control an act of randomness. And Raneem tells him that he doesn't seem to have a problem enjoying the benefits of it. Genki was right to be upset with him. Tiana, too, surprised they even answered when she duped his number. Jeff and Rio must be proud of what a great influence you are on Billy. I'll be sure to ask them. Miles leaps off the ground shouting, "You're going to leave my friends and family out of this!" As Miles throws himself into Raneem, she redirects the weight, spinning him around, letting one of the discs knock him off, giving her the chance to strike him with a kick to the head. He coughs, asking who is she, so she tells him her name. But for now, he can call her the Envoy of Death. She attacks again, but this time with the assistance of one of the discs, causing a massive explosion that launches Miles' body off the ledge and into the river below. She waits, and he doesn't surface, and she tells Miles that this is goodbye. Later, Miles begins to open up his eyes as he sees an arm reaching into the water, grabbing him. Misty Knight pulls him up, cracking a joke that she only left him alone for 15 minutes, and he almost died. Before he could respond, he coughs up water. And Miles begins to pick out what exactly is going on, realizing that Raneem has his home address. He panics as Misty tells him that he shouldn't go rushing off into something without knowing who the person is or what she's planning. Him thwipping headfirst into danger isn't going to get him anything but dead. It is going to cause a lot of folks grief. Misty reveals that at one point she got her hands on one of Raneem's discs and that they can use it to track Raneem back to her source of origin. But Miles says that he has to go check on his home first. So he flings off, going back to his house while Misty begins to follow the disc. She eventually gets to the location that Tiana is being held captive. And as Misty frees her, a mechanical tail from Scorpion comes to life, flinging at her. Meanwhile, across town, Miles hops over another building, noticing smoke coming out of where his apartment is, and he begins to panic, rushing over. As he gets street level, he looks up at the destroyed building and simply says, "Oh God." Raneem says that she's glad that he made it out alive. He's back just in time so that she can show him the end of the Morales family in person. Miles begins to get closer to the wreckage of the apartment, asking what did she do? And she tells him that she came to settle part of his debt, and now she'll collect the rest. She attempts to open with an attack, but Miles is furious, webbing up her discs, jumping into the fire in search of his family. Rio calls out and he punches his way through, seeing his parents and Billy huddled in the corner just out of range of the inferno. Miles begins to apologize, but Jeff tells him that this isn't on him. And then Miles grabs everyone, launching them into the street. Before Miles could even get his bearings, though, Rio shouts for him to look up, and a disc shoots by, knocking Miles into the air. He begins to fight with the disc. "Can I get 5 seconds to myself?" And Raneem yells no. He doesn't get to save the day. He took her family, and now she's going to take his. Suddenly, the discs begin to stop focusing on Miles, and they turn their attention to his parents, Jeff and Rio. He screams at her to attack him, and as he swings, he creates an electrical sword of his own. Raneem asks how is he doing that, and Miles says, I don't really know, but this new power is going to prevent you from hurting anybody. The two begin to fight for power, with Miles pushing himself back, cutting away at the discs, and then into Raneem. She tells him that this isn't right, and Raneem backs away, yelling for him to just shut up. She rockets herself at Miles, telling him that he doesn't know anything about her, but what she's gone through, what her limits are, nothing. And Miles tells her maybe not, but he doesn't think that she's a bad person, so stop and listen for a moment. They bounce off the ground with Miles picking himself up, telling her that he's sorry for everything that happened to her, truly. But it was all outside of his control, but he's still sorry. It shouldn't have been like that. He was given a chance while hers was taken away, and it wasn't fair. She has to stop this. Raneem tells him that he doesn't know what it's like for two people to sacrifice so much, to work so hard, to give her a better life. She just wanted to return the favor. She wanted to be a good daughter. Miles says that she's right. He doesn't understand, and he never will. But what he does know is that his family isn't to blame. So don't take it out on them. Take it out on him. He won't fight anymore. Just leave them alone. Raneem starts to freak out. No, this isn't fair. You still get to decide? You still get a shot at redemption? You still get to take the high road and give me your pity? I can't let this happen. I'm never going to stop coming for you or your family or your friends. I will be the thing that keeps you up at night. And if you want to stop me, you're going to have to see this through. The discs all begin to light up, and Miles asks, what is she doing? But Raneem jumps on them, stating, we're going to call it even, a simple trade, a mother for a mother, a father for a father. What do you say? Does that sound fair to you? She goes into strike, activating her Pyrrhic protocol. Miles tells her to stop. He won't let her do this, and she declares that they're just going to go out together then. The discs all have a chance to fully charge up, and Miles slams his new sword into them, telling her that he just needs to overload the machine. With that, there's a massive explosion that throws Miles to the ground. Jeff and Rio run over to help just as Misty and the others arrive, asking if Rabble just blew herself up. Miles yells that he tried to stop her. He tried to talk her out of it. He couldn't. He wasn't good enough. He begins to close his eyes as Rio shouts for him to stay awake. But Miles says he just wants to rest his eyes. Everything goes to black, and Miles wants to know why his face feels cold. He starts to blink and he sees Misty and another woman that he doesn't know. He panics about his mask, but Misty tells him to relax. He doesn't have to worry about that stuff. The next time that he blinks, he wakes up in a hospital room, seeing his parents, Jeff and Rio, by his side. He hugs them both, and Misty walks in, telling him that she's sorry to interrupt. She needed to check on her favorite pain-in-the-butt detective in training. Rio tells her that she did them a real solid on this one, and Misty says that it's all good. He's a good kid. Besides, can't have her intern banged up and out of the home. Miles thanks Misty, and Misty declares that Jeff and Rio raised one hell of a son. He's got a new shot. He might actually become a detective now. Elsewhere, Agent Gao walks through her holding block and stops at a cell, telling the inmate that they wanted her attention. They've got it. Their disappearing actor's cute enough to warrant some internal discussions. So she's bringing them an offer to finally put those skills to good use. Scorpion laughs. That's the thing about me. I'm always interested in new job opportunities. And that's the conclusion of the Miles Morales storyline. It's picking up with a new Carnage storyline where Carnage and Miles are battling, and we're going to be covering that very soon in celebration of the new movie. Like and subscribe so that you can catch the release of that video next week, and let me know in the comments down below. Do you prefer Peter Parker or Miles Morales as your Spider-Man? I made a video a while ago, and someone left me a comment that his son only sees Miles now. Peter is the old guy. And also, if you want more Miles Morales, I'll link you the one where he meets the original Miles from 616, and I'll link you his Clone Saga. Thanks for watching, everyone. I'll see you next time.
Across the Spider-Verse slaps so hard your brain will leave your body and all that's left will be the experience. Doesn't matter if you have a job, rent, or homework, this movie is gonna have you in a chokehold and it's gonna keep you there after you've left the theater. We knew this movie was gonna be good, but we were not prepared for it to actually live up to those expectations. This movie is in my top 2 Spider-Man films and its only competition is itself. The original Spider-Verse was so good it literally changed the industry, kicking off an entire era of style stylization and experimentation that we haven't gotten in many major motion pictures. Just like the original though, Across proves not only is it a technical marvel, but manages to be a love letter to the Spider-Man mythos, with stellar comedy and character writing that manages to do it all while sacrificing nothing. I fucking loved it so much that I'm almost mad that I have to share it. But that's the grind we live in. Now this movie is pretty much perfect to me. Everything from the visuals to the writing, every part of this film is going off. So much so that I pretty much only have like 3 things I could barely call nitpicks. So let's get the dumb shit out of the way so we can get back to hyping it up. In fact, let's take those 3 things and cut it down to 2, since the first one is more of just a heads up than anything else. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse is actually Across the Spider-Verse Part 1. That's right, for those who don't know, the sequel to the Spider-Verse kinda got crazy, and it was decided to break it up into 2 parts. So while the film does tell an incredibly powerful and satisfying story, don't go in expecting it to wrap up everything like the original. I knew that going in, so I was emotionally ready for it, but if you don't, this is your notice. But that also leads to my only real critique of the film. And that this movie is long. It's 2 hours and 16 minutes, and you're never bored or tired, and never does it feel like it's wasting your time. It is really well paced. That said, it being half the story, the last 10-ish minutes do feel like the movie is tiptoeing around trying to find just the right cliffhanger to leave off on. They pick a great spot. The film very much ends on a to be continued, and if you're looking for something a bit more conclusive, I don't know what to tell you. Moving on to personal preference. That will probably ruin your opinion of me. The visuals for each dimension they visit is spectacular. While Spider-Verse did a good job of giving the B-Team Spider People a unique visual style, this time around we really get to see applied to each dimension, with it all blending together seamlessly, which is crazy since all of them take pretty big swings visually. From a Leonardo da Vinci rough sketch world to Mumbai, Manhattan, when this film goes for it, it nails it. That said, I'm a little broken inside. So, the mood board that was Gwen's dimension kinda got me to giggle at times, as it's amazing how each shot will have unique lighting and background that changes between shots. But some of the cutbacks got me to giggle a little, and I can't explain why. These scenes are easily some of the best in the film. They are very powerful, but for some reason, it hit me weirdly, and those are really my only notes about the film. So let's go back to talking about what I liked, and starting with how this movie just continues to elevate Miles Morales.
Nah, I'ma do my own thing.
Miles is a character that has been the center of weird controversy for years. Despite not being the first alternate Spider-Man besides Peter, Miles has spent most of his existence being negged for plenty of bad faith reasons, having his existence questioned, picked apart, and treated as some anomaly in a medium where stranger shit happens weekly. So Across really tackles this identity crisis wonderfully, with the main crux of the movie being about how everyone is constantly telling Miles what his story is or should be, reflecting the real-world conflicts surrounding him and the classic teen troubles of trying to figure out who you want to be. Only this time with insane stakes. Yet the movie was able to take Miles and truly make him stand on his own. Hell, he's probably the best version of Spider-Man in this movie, refusing to stand aside when someone is in trouble, which is the most fundamental, the deepest core value of what it means to be Spider-Man, and no one in this film embodies it better than Miles, with it being his struggle to tell his own story that makes part 1 emotionally resonate even though the story isn't technically finished. As truly, everyone in this film won't shut the fuck up about where they think Miles should be in the mythos. From his parents to his villains to even Mr. Out-of-Pocket himself, Miguel O'Hara.
Idea what you're doing!
This dude truly needs to take the biggest chill pill in the world. Miles is fighting the Spot, he's fighting Miguel, he is fighting even the rules of reality. But through adversity, he refuses to buckle as we get to see what makes him truly a great Spider-Man. The original Spider-Verse was very much an origin story for Miles taking up the mantle. This, though, is where we truly get to see Miles define what it means to wear the mask. And it's that journey that makes this film work. We meet so many people, we go to so many places, but that through line is what keeps this movie feeling focused, where so many other films feel like they start to meander. And Miles isn't the only character elevated by this movie. Gwen honestly gets the biggest glow up for a character who didn't really need one. The movie opens setting up Gwen's personal struggles and really digging into her origin story, going from a brief summary to an actual tragedy that helps you understand where she is in her life, and how it's quietly destroying all the relationships she has, while really putting into focus just how much she and Miles connect. So if you didn't ship them before this film, this one will definitely have you on board for them hooking up. It's a terrible idea in the comics, but here it really works. Also, whoever said that this film had a love triangle in it really needs to double check what a love triangle is, as that comment had me panicking, but trust me, it's not a problem. In fact, Spider-Punk, aka Hobie Brown, is a highlight. This character could have so easily come off as tryhard or pretentious, but instead the man is a delight, which I feel like you can say about all the new characters.
My name is Professor Prabhakar.
This dude is beyond charming, and he could honestly carry his own show. Jessica Drew is a little bit out of focus, but nails it every time she gets the spotlight. Miguel, like I said, is a massive prick, but you get just enough context to understand why he's like this. Although he does have a massive axe to grind with Miles, he gels well with the rest of the Spider cast, serving as a sour, overly intense leader of a bunch of wisecracking Spider people. Every Spider person is completely their own character. The main ones naturally get more style and attention, like Hobie's paper cutout and shifting color scheme. That's so cool. Also, the web shooters. They're all cool and such a great way to make each Spider person distinct, as this movie could have so easily just had all these characters feeling so samey, but they don't, even when there's a giant chase scene with them. Also, another MVP of this film, definitely Rio Morales, as she is definitely in the top 10 for best cartoon moms. The Morales family is just so wholesome, full of small moments to show that they love and care for each other, and just how incredibly frustrating it is to be a family. Also, the soundtrack for this film is going off. Might need to rewatch it a few more times, let the music try and unseat the old soundtrack in my head, but it has a fighting chance. And yes, the fights are insane. There are multiple extended action sequences that will leave you breathless without feeling tired, peppering in small enough breaks for you to breathe while enjoying the visual crack. Really, this film is a phenomenon. It is an experience that I still feel like I need another month to fully process. If you haven't seen the film already, go check it out. If you have, see it again. This is my glowing endorsement, and now if you don't want spoilers, now's the time to get out.
And then I looked at my uncle and...
Let me guess. He died?
So the big thing about this film is that the Spider-Verse is built on canon, and that messing with certain events can lead to the universe collapsing. So in pursuit of the greater good, Miguel has formed a spider cult of people who have bought into the fatalistic perspective that they just have to let some people die to save the rest. This is the big break that sets Miles apart from everyone else, as they literally tell him, hey, your dad is gonna die, and we want you to just let it happen. Despite the fact that letting bad things happen is a tragedy that defines the Peter Parker end of the mythos. As while they have bought into the idea that this has to happen, Miles refuses to let anyone, not even fate, define who he is. Which is the kind of big F you, I'm doing what's right energy that makes me love superheroes. Especially in the context of Miguel resenting Miles for being a supposed anomaly, claiming that if it wasn't for him and the alternate dimension Spider, then the original Peter wouldn't have died, meaning that the whole in reality would never have happened, which then triggered all the rest of the events of the Spider-Verse. And the thing that makes this interesting though, is when taking that idea and looking at Miguel, and you really just see the self-hatred come through and how it relates to Miles. As it does seem like the collider from the first movie is what allowed travel in the multiverse to really become a thing and to become a major part for everyone. And this is what led to Miguel giving into temptation to replace an alternate dead version of himself to be with his family. So when this led to the death of that universe, Miguel is devastated, while other spiders cope with humor, Miguel just has this blistering rage and this self-assigned borderline dictatorial role as a protector of the multiverse, going to increasing extremes to keep it all together. So all these things fraying on his nerves, the anger, the regret, the constant sense that the multiverse is just one mistake away from being wiped out, yeah, you can see why he's just a gigantic prick who hates Miles, even though Miles isn't really to blame for any of this. But he is the inciting incident that led to Miguel's own mistakes. Miguel is out of 100 and connects Miles with his own fuck-up. So you get why he's being extra out of pocket. This all just helps set up why Miles is being the best Spider-Man in this movie. He's not an anomaly. He's not some accident. And this just makes Miles so fucking great, is that he's off doing his own thing. He's rejecting all his fails and we have to let this happen. And he's saying, no, I'm gonna fight the good fight. I am going to do everything I can to stop this. As he's just not bought into this whole everything needs to be canon bit. And again, we don't know for sure if these canon events are fully connected. Miguel is convinced they claim to have stopped other ones before, but how closely related the two are is still semi an open question. Also, the ending of us seeing Prowler Miles is so good. I actually guessed pretty early on that Miles was gonna get sent to the spider's original dimension, so it was kind of painful to watch him tell his secret to the wrong version of his mom, but setting Miles against a different version of himself, as it really does open up the opportunity for us to find out that this Miles was meant to be this universe's original Spider-Man. Especially since the flashback to the spider being taken actually shows us that it was right next to Prowler Miles, opening up the possibility for us to find out that this Miles was meant to be the original Spider-Man, proving that Miles wasn't an anomaly like Miguel claims. And things that are great, Spot, he's interesting, and I love him for that. He starts out as the perfect nuisance supervillain, self-obsessed, blaming Spider-Man for his situation, but Spot has crafted this narrative in his head that they are fated rivals, so he finds Miles' lack of interest in him frustrating, leading him to do increasingly dumb shit to beat him. But it never feels like the story has Miles act out like too much of a jackass, that the situation is actually his fault. Spot is a prick who became a monster. And this all perfectly blends into Spot's role in the story, where he is the antagonist in the traditional sense. He is the person who sets the events in the movie in motion, but he's not the big, overarching villain. He's the thing that caused the more interesting personal drama to happen. The possibility of Miles' dad dying, Miles having to go up against the other spider people, the reveal of Miles' alleged nature in the multiverse. Spot is the ticking clock that pressures everyone else in the story to scramble to fix things, so it doesn't need him to be in the story all that much to drive it. Kinda similar to the Kingpin in the original, where his doomsday colliders what the heroes have to rush to stop, all while the real meat of the story is Miles' journey to becoming Spider-Man. Jason Schwartzman kills in this role. This man is way too good at this, and the animation really sells just how comical he is, only for that switch to flip, and then we realize he's actually a nightmare. And finally, I loved Gwen in this film. From her relationship to her dad falling apart to them reconciling, whilst uncovering the potential secret to saving Miles' dad, is as simple as his dad not taking the promotion. Gwen is in such a messed up place in this film, where she desperately wants to be with Miles, but knows all this baggage about him that she just doesn't know how to share, even though she wants to. Plus getting those few moments to see her with her Peter before he died does wonders to sell just how she pushes everyone away, as she truly doesn't know how to tell her dad, or tell really anybody about what she's dealing with, which explains why she initially sides with Miguel, as they are all spiders, they understand the struggle. But to side with Miles would mean getting kicked out of the group, and going back to being alone, and worse, getting sent back home. With her learning to finally stop being afraid when she makes amends with her dad, or gathering up her true group of friends to go help Miles and save the day. Truly, this film is peak cinema. I loved every second of it, and while I was nervous that it wasn't going to live up to the hype, it was a banger that every person that worked on it deserves all the props in the world, as it really just continues to prove just how amazing animation is when the people behind it are allowed to go ham. It's gonna be hard to go back to regular animated films after this. But hey, any animated film in theaters is a win these days, so I'm happy. Thank you all for watching, like, share, and subscribe for some reason. Love you all, peace out.
It has been over 6 decades since Spider-Man was created, and since then, the friendly neighborhood superhero has grown steadily to become one of the most popular superheroes in the world. A superhero is only as good as his rogues gallery, and the web slinger has been challenged by some of the toughest villains in the Marvel Universe.
No one says no to me!
In this video, we will explore every single Spider-Man villain to have ever existed, from the most well-known to the most obscure. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
Power of the sun in the palm of my hand. Nothing will stand in our way.
Dr. Octopus. Otto Octavius, aka Dr. Octopus, has been one of the oldest Spider-Man villains, and he has shown multiple sides of his character over the years. He grew up through a traumatic childhood under an abusive father, and he was coaxed by his father to use violence as a means of solving problems. He grew up to become a genius nuclear physicist, and he developed high-tech mechanical arms controlled by a computer. This was supposed to help him in his research, but the man was soon blinded by the extreme power of the 4 tentacle-like claw-like arms, which got him the name Dr. Octopus. According to one story arc, the mechanized arms got fused to his body after an accidental radiation, and even his brain had mutated to give in to this suppressed evil side. He took to a life of crime, and this eventually brought him at loggerheads with Spider-Man. The live-action movies explored his story arc quite thoroughly, and the comic books have been quite generous in making his duels with Spider-Man memorable. Using the immense power of his mechanized arms, he often overpowers the web-slinger, and Spider-Man has to make use of some smart tactics to get the better of him. While he has been majorly portrayed as a notorious supervillain, Dr. Octopus has also been an anti-hero at times and teamed up with Spider-Man for a few missions.
Out am I?
Green Goblin. The Green Goblin has been an evil personality adapted by several villains, but the incarnation of Norman Osborn is easily the most memorable one. He grew up along with his father, who was a failed business investor, and Norman was determined to gain wealth and power when he was older. However, even he was later faced with the prospect of his business going bankrupt and his son Harry's life jeopardized. This is when he struck a deal with the devil in exchange for his son's soul. The business started flourishing, but he eventually paid the price for his evil deed. Now he wanted to rule the criminal underworld, and he developed the Green Goblin suit with special powers. Unfortunately, the powers also corrupted him, and he had numerous encounters with Spider-Man. He was among the rare members of Spider-Man's rogues gallery who found out his real identity, and the live-action movies glorified his character further, with William Dafoe playing the role. Later, his son, Harry Osborn, also used the Green Goblin alias, and a psychologist named Dr. Barton Hamilton became the next person to fall prey to the temptations of the raw power. The Green Goblin had exceptional combat skills, used a flying hoverboard, and had a variety of weapons and explosives to take down the enemies. Spider-Man has been troubled by several notorious costumed villains, but few have been as intimidating as the Green Goblin. Venom. Every Spider-Man fan is familiar with the threat posed by the sentient alien symbiote. Venom has an amorphous, liquid-like form, and it survives and thrives after bonding with a host body, preferably human. Although Venom was introduced relatively late compared to some of the other major Spider-Man villains, it immediately made an impact and became popular with the fans. The first host of this nefarious symbiote was Spider-Man himself, and it took some time for the web-slinger to realize that he was turning to his dark side under its effects. Eventually, Spider-Man got rid of Venom, but it went on to merge with Eddie Brock, the troubled journalist. Venom thrives under the dormant and repressed dark side of every individual and adds to the same. It gives the individual extreme strength and powers, and Venom also had the ability to go undetected by the spider sense. This shape-shifting alien symbiote can mimic the appearance of other organisms, and after bonding with Spider-Man, it granted the hosts almost all the powers of the superhero. However, Venom can be vulnerable to powerful sonic waves and fire, and this has been utilized by Spider-Man every now and then during their battles. Although Venom has been a nemesis for Spider-Man, getting the better of the superhero on countless occasions, later on it also shifted its focus to do some good. After Eddie Brock, Venom also bonded with the likes of Flash Thompson, and it has always been fun to witness the chaos and madness associated with this entity. Sandman. The Sandman, aka William Baker, was a simple man from Queens, New York, who grew up through a troubled childhood following his father's abandoning the family. He developed a fascination with sand, and while he was bullied frequently, he learned to fight back by slipping through the hands of the tormentors just like sand. Finally, his troubles in school went to the extent where he was expelled, and he turned into a violent, bitter man. He found himself in prison pretty soon, but his real transformation happened after he escaped from prison and entered a nuclear testing site on a beach. His body bonded with the radioactive sand, and his molecular structure went through a permanent change. He then acquired new powers, and his life of crime made him fight Spider-Man quite frequently. The Marvel Cinematic Universe has been kinder to the character and portrayed him as a tragic villain who ended up in his condition while struggling to raise money for his sick daughter. He was shown to be responsible for Uncle Ben's murder and had a critical role in the origin story of Spider-Man. Spider-Man. However, Sandman was not essentially evil in the comic books as well, and he often allied with Spider-Man when the city faced greater threats. After his transformation, William Baker could not only change into his sand state body, but he also got superhuman strength and powers of sand blasts. Only water and extreme heat could make him vulnerable, and ever since his inception, Sandman has been a memorable villain in Spider-Man's extensive rogues gallery. Mysterio. It would seem baffling that someone with no evident superpowers could pose a serious threat to Spider-Man, but Mysterio proved to be an exception. His real name was Quentin Beck, who was a master of special effects and illusion. He worked as a stuntman in Hollywood, and when he failed to make it big as an actor, he took to a life of crime. He managed to frame the friendly neighborhood superhero for a robbery case, and he also used chemicals and technology to outsmart Spider-Man during their fight. He also joined the Sinister Six in order to get his revenge on Spider-Man, and later story arcs explored his character further. As an individual, Quentin Beck had no superhuman skills, but he uses his skills of magic, hypnotism, and stage illusions to good effect. He is also a skilled combatant and uses several equipment and devices to help him fight his enemies. In the MCU, Mysterio appeared in Spider-Man Far From Home, played by Jake Gyllenhaal, and the character tricked Spider-Man into believing in a lie that he had created. It took some time for the superhero to see through his illusions, and Mysterio was fought and defeated. However, the post-credits revealed that Mysterio revealed the real identity of Spider-Man to the public before dying, making him look like a public enemy. It took some serious time travel and further complications to fix the wrong, and once again, his treachery made Mysterio get Spider-Man into trouble. Morbius. A number of supervillains in both Marvel and DC Universe are stemmed from a horrible childhood, and Morbius is no exception. His father abandoned the family, and Morbius also suffered from a rare blood condition that caused him to be isolated by his friends. He was an intelligent young man, but after being rejected in love, things started going haywire for him. He won the Nobel Prize in biochemistry, and an experimental treatment to cure his blood disease went wrong. He turned into a pseudo-vampire who had to consume blood to survive. Just like a vampire, he was also averse to sunlight and had similar powers. He developed fangs, and his victims turned into vampires as well. His interaction with Spider-Man came at a critical moment in the story arc where Spider-Man had developed 6 arms and was looking for a cure. He soon realized that Morbius's blood condition could be a potential cure, and after their first fight, Spider-Man tracked him down and managed to get some of his blood. In a way, Morbius helped the friendly neighborhood superhero get rid of his strange condition, and this notorious supervillain also had a few run-ins with the X-Men, besides many more future battles with Spider-Man himself. Apart from his usual vampire abilities, Morbius could also hypnotize anyone looking at him directly, and religious icons could not deter him like they could affect a regular vampire. This ageless, living vampire might not be one of the first names that come to mind when we think of Spider-Man villains, but he is certainly among the most memorable ones.
You're a fake! A coward! This is your idea of a fair hunt?
Kraven the Hunter. Kraven the Hunter has been one of the most formidable Spider-Man enemies of all time, and for a good reason. His character started as a Russian immigrant named Sergei Kravinov, and he came to the US after his noble family back home was killed during the events of the February Revolution in 1917. He went on to become a big game hunter who took down powerful people just as a sport. He set his eyes on Spider-Man because defeating him would make him the greatest hunter in the world. He used certain jungle herbs to create a potion that granted him insane physical abilities, and this potion would enhance his senses to superhuman levels. Kraven was a fierce hunter who avoided using conventional weapons and took down his enemies with his bare hands. He also abided by his own twisted code of honor because he believed in fair competition. He often underestimated the true powers of Spider-Man, and this got him defeated during a few of their fights. He was also part of the Sinister Six purely because of his rivalry with Spider-Man, but the web-slinger continued to prevail. In one of his story arcs, Kraven grew frustrated of his multiple failures and shot the superhero with a coma-inducing drug before burying him and impersonating him in public. However, even this time, Spider-Man came back to defeat him one last time. There have been numerous story arcs featuring this twisted supervillain, and each one of them has been a memorable experience for the readers. Carnage. Just like Venom, Carnage is also a deadly symbiote. But luckily for Spider-Man, the two didn't get along. In fact, Carnage is as much a nemesis for Spider-Man as he is an arch-rival for Venom. Similar to Venom, Carnage is also an amorphous, parasitic alien symbiote and needs a human host to bond with. While Venom was largely restricted to a few hosts, Carnage had several, and, in many ways, this symbiote was a darker and deadlier version of Venom. Some of Carnage's memorable hosts included the psycho killer Cletus Cassidy, Carl Malice, Norman Osborn, and even Gwen Stacy. Carnage is regarded as a female symbiote and even gave birth to an offspring called Toxin. Some versions suggest that Carnage was more powerful than Spider-Man and Venom put together, and this was because the symbiote developed on Earth in an alien environment. She is capable of planting evil thoughts in the host's mind using a symbiote tendril, and she has shown having all the powers of Spider-Man, such as sticking to a wall or climbing tall surfaces effortlessly. Carnage also has insane regenerative skills, and there have been instances of her recovering after being ripped apart in half. Cassidy, one of Carnage's primary hosts, had mastered the use of this symbiote to his advantage, and his maniacal will made Carnage even stronger. We believe that Carnage has been relatively underused in the Marvel Universe, and there is a lot of scope to develop the character further. Lizard. Dr. Curtis Connors was a renowned geneticist until one of his research experiments went terribly wrong. He was exploring the ability of reptiles to grow back their missing limbs, and he developed a lizard DNA serum which would provide humans with similar abilities. However, he tested this on himself and turned into a dangerous anthropomorphic lizard. Spider-Man initially helped him get rid of this condition, but the traits of the lizard remained in his subconscious. He would often turn into his lizard form, and during these times he lost the usual control of his brain. He believed that if allowed to continue, one day the lizard form would completely take over, and thus he always worked to find a permanent cure for his condition. The reptilian humanoid monster has encountered Spider-Man on countless occasions, and many times the web-slinger found himself on the wrong side of Lizard's personality. Although most people know him as a recurring Spider-Man villain, Lizard has also been effective as a capable ally, especially during his fight against Rhino. In his transformed state, Dr. Curtis, or Lizard, possessed extreme strength while also portraying significant intelligence. He also had lethal, sharp claws and could scale walls quite easily. His thick skin made him highly resistant to injuries, and the razor-sharp teeth could land a lethal bite on his opponent. Overall, Lizard has been a remarkable character in the Spider-Man universe, and his fights with Spider-Man have been iconic to say the least.
Willie, you seem angry.
I will destroy you!
Take your best shot.
Kingpin. According to commonly used mafia slang, the word Kingpin means a crime lord, and this Marvel character surely lived up to his name. He was easily among the deadliest mob bosses in New York City, and his crime spree went on to have some superhero enemies such as Spider-Man and Daredevil. He started off as a poor kid named Grant Fisk, who was always bullied in school because of his obesity, but he soon learned to fight back by forming a gang, using his training in combat. He was spotted by a mob boss who took him in as a mentor, but Kingpin turned on his savior in quick time. Besides antagonizing the superheroes, Kingpin also had some villainous enemies in the form of Hydra and Madger, the infamous groups. Later, he formed a massive criminal coalition to deal with the threats posed by the likes of Spider-Man. One-on-one, he couldn't stand a chance against the mighty superhero, but his evil mind always had some plans to get the better of him. He had some memorable face-offs against Daredevil and Punisher as well, and he would usually fight them using his his hired assassins or rogue supervillains. As we have discussed before, his main strength is his intellect, and he is also a skilled martial arts fighter. The bald, obese crime lord can be highly deceptive, and you would be amazed to learn about some of his personal accomplishments in the comic books. A recent story arc portrayed him retiring gracefully, and for the sake of the character, we hope that Kingpin is brought back very soon. Electro. In line with some of the other origin stories of major Spider-Man villains, Electro also comes from humble beginnings. He was a man named Maxwell Dillon, working as an electrical engineer and lineman. While he was fixing a power line, a sudden lightning caused his body to undergo certain mutagenic changes. He became a human form of an electrical capacitor, and his powers continued to grow steadily. He took the name Electro and embraced a life of crime because he believed that his superpowers would be unmatched. When he fought Spider-Man for the first time, the friendly neighborhood web-slinger was almost fried to death after touching him. He made use of a fire hose to cause a short circuit and defeated him. Electro has often disrupted Spider-Man's wall-crawling abilities by using electrostatic forces, and some of their later interactions haven't been as decisive as the first one. In their extensive comic book storyline, Electro has messed up Spider-Man multiple times, and this creepy supervillain has also fought Daredevil on a few occasions. He could generate powerful bolts of electricity of almost 100,000 volts, and the electrical charge also made him super fast and powerful. Jamie Foxx's version of Electro in The Amazing Spider-Man 2 had a few remarkable fight sequences starring Spider-Man, and he recently reprised his role in Spider-Man No Way Home. Vulture. Adrian Toombs, aka the Vulture, might be a psychopath, but he is also a genius with immense knowledge of technology. He studied as an electronic engineer and developed several incredible devices, such as a superpowered flight harness. After he lost his job under unfair circumstances, he turned to a life of crime, taking the name Vulture. He developed an enhanced version of his flight harness, which was electromagnetically powered, and this allowed him to fly around. The harness also enabled him with extreme strength and increased his lifespan instantly. He went on to become a feared, remorseless killer, and his life of crime brought him in conflict with Spider-Man. He developed a device to steal Spider-Man's youth, and this left the young superhero in an elderly form while transforming Vulture into a young man. Fortunately, the effect soon wore off, and their future battles weren't so one-sided. Peter Parker also developed a device to counter the powers of the Vulture, and it worked wonders when activated during airborne fights and caused him to crash. The Vulture also proved to have amazing resistance to injuries, and some of the fatal falls and blows did him little damage. Besides his powerful wings, Vulture also had lethal fangs and talons. He added various other weapons to his arsenal over the years, which made him more versatile and threatening than ever before.
Pick on someone your own size, Rhino.
There is no one, my
Rhino. It is amusing how so many of the prominent Marvel and DC supervillains have been inspired by animals. Rhino is another addition to the long list, and this character started off as a Russian thug named Alexei Stetsevich. He went through a number of chemical and radiation treatments that were intended to provide him with an armor-like artificial skin. The experiments were successful, and he not only gained an impenetrable skin, but also superhuman powers. He was initially defeated by Spider-Man and sent to jail, but there was more of him to come. After his sentence was over, he went through further augmentations and his strength was increased further. Now, he also had a super durable skin that would make him invincible, but all the modifications did not help him when he faced the Hulk. The Rhino suit, however, became quite a handy weapon during his future fights with Spider-Man. Besides, Rhino could also charge at his targets, just like a rhinoceros, and he could move at super fast speeds. The Rhino suit could withstand extreme temperatures and protect him from almost all forms of external attacks. The only major drawback for this supervillain was his slow reaction time, which allowed the likes of Spider-Man to outmaneuver him. Chameleon. Chameleon is famously known for being the first major villain encountered by Spider-Man during his journey as a superhero. He was a man of Russian origins, named Dmitry Smerdyakov, and from a very young age he showed signs of an incredible talent for disguise. He could impersonate just about anyone, and his masterful disguise skills made him take the title Chameleon. He even impersonated Spider-Man and got him framed for his crimes. But the treachery did not last long, and he was eventually arrested. Later, he managed to inspire Kraven the Hunter to get rid of the web slinger, and in a few story arcs, Chameleon even took on the likes of Iron Man and Hulk. His mental condition worsened after his half-brother committed suicide, and he wanted to make Spider-Man suffer the consequences of his pain. He even formed an alliance with Harry Osborn, the Green Goblin, but none of his plans ever amounted to something substantial. He did, however, cause a mental breakdown for Spider-Man, and he was also one of the few villains to uncover the real identity of Spider-Man as Peter Parker. There have been a few morbid versions of Chameleon, such as the time when he brutally killed his victims and dumped them in an acid bath. Chameleon was a unique antagonist who started off with almost no superpowers as such, but over time his impersonation skills became unbelievably real. He made use of certain devices, such as the holographic technology-enabled computer, to be changed into someone at the push of a button.
Dressed like a scorpion, where would I be? Behind you! Me, I'd end it now.
Scorpion. McGargan, who later became Scorpion, was a private investigator who was assigned the task of finding out how Peter Parker got the best pictures of Spider-Man. Peter easily managed to evade the prowling eyes of the detective, but his employer, J. Jonah Jameson, used Gargan as a guinea pig for his new experiment. This was supposed to enable him with the powers of a scorpion, because the creature is a natural enemy of spiders. McGargan received a powerful club-like mechanical tail, and many other superpowers that made him defeat Spider-Man twice. However, these experiments also messed with his mind, and the predatory instincts of Scorpion soon took over his human sanity. He harbored a maddening vendetta against Spider-Man and attempted to destroy the friendly neighborhood superhero on multiple occasions. A solid blow from his tail landed some heavy damage on his enemies, and he also had powerful pincers as a part of his costume, which allowed him to tear apart Spider-Man's webbing. The Scorpion armor continued to be further developed over the years, and his numerous battles with the web slinger made for some very exciting pages in the comic books.
A little late for Halloween. Name's Hobgoblin, and you're right on time for your funeral.
Hobgoblin. Just like the Green Goblin, Hobgoblin has been an alias for various supervillains across the Marvel Universe. One of the first ones was an egotistical billionaire, Roderick Kingsley, who altered Norman Osborn's formula to improve some of its aspects. He took to a life of crime and framed others in an effort to get away. He was eventually exposed by Spider-Man, which caused him to flee New York, but he returned soon afterwards in his Hobgoblin avatar. A reporter named Edward Leeds was brainwashed by Roderick and filled in for the evil billionaire as the Hobgoblin during his absence. Later, a petty thug named Lefty Donovan also showed the results of the Goblin formula and troubled the citizens briefly as Hobgoblin. Several other villains have taken up the mantle, and a vast majority of them ended up being Spider-Man foes and clashed with the superhero. The Hobgoblin powers included an advanced Goblin glider and an array of explosives and weapons that made it an invincible fighting machine.
Hold it! Is the big shot hero wall crawler stuck? Let me give you a hand!
Hydro-Man. A simple crewman on a cargo ship, Morris Bench, was accidentally knocked overboard by Spider-Man. Unfortunately, just as he fell into the waters, a powerful experimental generator was being tested, and unknown radiation and exposure to certain bacteria changed him into the Hydro-Man. Naturally, he blamed Spider-Man for his condition, and the sole purpose of his life became the destruction of the web-slinging superhero. He was defeated by Spider-Man, but Hydro-Man was not one to back down so easily. In one of the story arcs, he combined with Sandman to form a monstrous entity called the Mud Thing. Once again, Spider-Man emerged victorious in this conflict, and Hydro Man went on to join the Sinister Syndicate, a nefarious group of supervillains. He also joined forces with the Green Goblin to get rid of Spider-Man, but even their best efforts bore no results. Hydro Man might not have tasted much success against Spider-Man, but he certainly made for stiff competition for the superhero. He had the powers of transforming into a liquid form, and this enabled him to access certain small openings and areas that would be otherwise unreachable. He could also increase or decrease his mass as he desired, and later certain enhancements made him even stronger. Overall, he was always a skilled fighter, who deserves to be considered as a serious threat to Spider-Man. Shocker. Many of us became familiar with the Shocker from Spider-Man, the animated series, but this iconic villain has been a troublemaker even in the comic book story arcs. He was a man named Herman Schultz, who was a high school dropout with incredible technological skills. However, he used his talents for crime and became a notorious burglar who was hailed as the world's finest safecracker. After he was caught during his initial attempts, he developed a pair of gauntlets which allowed him to shoot powerful, high-frequency air blasts. He became known as the Shocker, and when he encountered Spider-Man during one of his robbery attempts, the superhero was defeated. Over the years, he accomplished many of his bizarre plans, including holding the entire New York City hostage or trying to ensure permanent youth. He allied with various supervillains such as Chameleon, Dr. Octopus, and Norman Osborn, and most of his conflicts were centered around Spider-Man. Shocker was quite a colorful character, but one of the main reasons behind his constant failure was his paranoia and lack of confidence. He was also dependent on his specialized suit, without which he was virtually powerless.
I don't know how you found me, Spider-Man, but no one's going to find you, ever!
Jekyll. The Jackal alias was used by multiple supervillains, but almost all of them challenged Spider-Man. Miles Warren is the best-known version of Jackal, and he was a professor who taught Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy. He had an unhealthy obsession for Gwen, and when she was killed by Green Goblin, Warren blamed Spider-Man for her fates. The insane biology professor turned into the Jackal and ensured some memorable duels with Spider-Man. He blended his genes with the DNA of a jackal, and this gave him superpowers like heightened strength, speed, and agility. This alter ego of Miles Warren sported a green suit along with gauntlets with sharp clawed edges on each finger. He also trained in combat and experimented in cloning humans. Not only did he trouble Spider-Man, he also set the trap for other major supervillains to get the better of him. Before he learned that Peter Parker was Spider-Man, he even held Peter hostage to bring in Spider-Man, and later he made various attempts to clone Peter. In one of the story arcs, Jackal captured the superhero but let him go after realizing that Spider-Man was no match for his powers. It was later revealed that one of his cloning attempts indeed succeeded, and he even gathered a clone army to attack Spider-Man. Hammerhead. This sworn enemy of Spider-Man was a mobster who dressed up like he belonged to the 1920s. His family had immigrated from the Soviet Union to Italy, and he always dreamed of growing up to be a gangster. He started as a small-time hitman and soon gained a reputation for rising through the ranks of the mob. Later, he killed his own father because he believed that his abusive parenting led him to become a villain. During his stint with the mob, he was once battered and bruised with severe injuries to his head. A crazy surgeon who had lost his medical license found him and used this opportunity to redeem his glory. Hammerhead was operated on, and a part of his broken skull was replaced with a steel alloy. However, his only retained memory was of a mob boss from the 1920s, and he started behaving like one after he woke up. He then clashed with Spider-Man during a gang war, and the superhero forced him to leave the country. He came back for revenge and even kidnapped Aunt May to gain leverage. Spider-Man rescued his aunt, and slowly Kingpin took over his position in the crime ring of New York. Hammerhead continued to appear in various story arcs, and even without any notable superhuman abilities, he was a unique antagonist in the diverse supervillains gallery of Spider-Man.
Oh, hey, Spider.
Felicia, the Magi are no joke. You shouldn't be playing with them.
Oh, but I like
Black Cat. It wouldn't be unfair to say that what Catwoman is to Batman, Black Cat is to Spider-Man. Across their multiple story arcs, Black Cat, aka Felicia Hardy, has been everything from his sworn enemy to his love interest. Her father was a famous cat burglar, and she had a traumatic experience in college where her boyfriend forced himself upon her. However, she refused to duck down as a villain and trained in combat. Unfortunately, before she could get her revenge, her boyfriend died in a car crash, and she used her new skills in her burglary attempts. During her life of crime, she used the Black Cat costume, and right from her first interaction with Spider-Man, she felt an unexplained connection with him. She trusted him and tried to gain his attention, and in return, the friendly neighborhood superhero tried his best to undo her criminal record. After she proved her true intentions time and again, Peter did get into a relationship with her, but she started to grow insecure about her lack of superpowers. This helped Kingpin lay a trap for her, and she underwent a procedure that got her bad luck, which also affected Spider-Man. Eventually, they broke up, and she started robbing the rich to give to the poor. In the course of time, she fought the superhero, led him into traps, and their adorable bond turned into enmity. While Black Cat never had any superpowers, she later acquired the ability to cause bad luck to anyone in her vicinity. Calypso. This voodoo priestess from Haiti posed a serious threat for Spider-Man quite a few times. Calypso was a psychopathic woman, and she was also associated with Kraven the Hunter before driving him to commit suicide. In a later story arc, she was shown to have incredible supernatural powers, which she acquired after sacrificing her younger sister. She almost ended up killing Spider-Man before the superhero managed to fight back, and she was seemingly killed in retaliation. However, the menace soon resurfaced, and this time Calypso was after Haitian refugees whom she turned into zombie slaves. She fought the likes of Daredevil as well, but her bitter rivalry with Spider-Man always made for some mouth-watering stories. She tried to use her spells on Spider-Man and Alyosha, but it did not work, and she was eventually captured and killed by the latter. Calypso's major abilities included her knowledge of the dark arts, and she used totems, voodoo drums, magic potions, and various spells to achieve her sinister plans. She could also control the minds of her victims and resurrect the dead, but even with all these supernatural powers, she never really became more than a serious nuisance for the wall-crawler superhero. Punisher. The Punisher is regarded as one of Marvel's most popular anti-hero characters, but he did find himself on the wrong side of Spider-Man on a few occasions. This violent vigilante took out a vicious campaign against crime, where he did not shy away from murdering, torturing, or kidnapping his victims. It all started after a mob violence killed his wife and 2 children, and the Punisher became known for his unforgiving, brutal methods. Since he was part of the United States Marine Corps, he was a trained soldier, and he was a master of using various deadly firearms. While you might rightly think that he is not a villain for Spider-Man to take down, his actions often indicated otherwise. The righteous Spider-Man did not approve of his methods, and this brought them on opposing sides of a few intense duels. Besides, the character of Punisher started off as a proper villain, and he was once sent to New York to kill the webhead superhero. He has been a valuable ally to Spider-Man as well, but during the times when they traded a few blows, he won a fair share of those fights.
Alone. There's a poem in there somewhere.
You know better than me.
To Tombstone. Lonnie Thompson Lincoln had a troubled childhood where he suffered extreme bullying by his peers. Soon the torture and trauma pushed him to a life of crime, and he became the big bully himself, extorting others for protection money. He went on to become a hitman and gave himself the appearance of a vampire to take his enemies by surprise. He grew through the ranks of the criminal underworld and became known as Tombstone. He became one of Kingpin's finest hitmen, and eventually he crossed paths with Spider-Man. The rivalry did not go as he had expected, and the friendly neighborhood superhero soon defeated him and turned him in. He soon broke out of prison, and this time when Spider-Man apprehended him, Tombstone wasn't going to be taken down easily. In fact, he almost beat Spider-Man to death before he was betrayed by an old friend. Exposure to an experimental gas caused his body to undergo some changes, and his strength and other abilities grew to superhuman proportions. He worked alongside other notable Spider-Man villains like Green Goblin, but his consequent interactions with the superhero did not get him too many victories. Mr. Negative. A Chinese immigrant named Martin Lee tried to move to the US, but he got up on a slave ship and a mob boss named Silvermane turned him into a test subject. An experimental drug was used on him and it gave rise to two distinct personalities. Mr. Negative, a ruthless crime lord who seeks to take over New York City, and Mr. Positive, a philanthropist who cares for the poor. This dissociative personality disorder ensured that Mr. Negative did not have a shred of conscience or goodness, but eventually it was closed that the man was aware of both his personalities. Mr. Negative once tried to kill Spider-Man with a special formula called Devil's Breath, but the web-slinging superhero escaped unhurt by holding his breath long enough. He tried to destroy the superhero on a few other occasions, and Mr. Negative also fought the likes of the Punisher. His appearance was that of a photographic negative, and he possessed superhuman strength apart from his ability to mind control others and use energy to charge various weapons around him.
You've been a very naughty boy.
Let him go!
After his failed coup,
Mephisto. While Mephisto is mainly associated with Silver Surfer and Johnny Blaze, one shouldn't forget that he was the one behind the transformation of Norman and Harry Osborn into the Green Goblin. This demonic entity posed as Satan and performed various rituals to achieve certain traits of the dark forces. He usually struck a deal with his victims in order to take over their souls, and Mephisto has been a constant figure in Marvel Comics for decades. Besides creating Superman's greatest enemies, he also clashed with Peter Parker's superhuman form on a few occasions, and even struck a deal with a Spider-Man from another universe. This powerful demon possessed astonishing magical powers, and he was an immortal who could manipulate the forces of nature. He was a shapeshifter and had the ability to alter time and dimensions when he wanted. His regenerative powers were extreme, and he would acquire souls and continue to grow stronger. Even if his physical form got destroyed, he would still continue to exist and come back in another form. He has been one of Marvel's deadliest supervillains of all time, and it would have been even better if we got to see more of his face-offs against Spider-Man. Living Brain. The initial version of the Living Brain was an extremely advanced supercomputer created by Dr. Petty. It was being demonstrated at Midtown High School, and it was claimed that the machine could give the answer to just about anything. One of the students asked the machine about the real identity of Spider-Man as Peter Parker watched in horror. Luckily, the Living Brain answered in a code that could not be deciphered. Two workmen who were transporting it wanted to use the device for gambling purposes, and a tussle broke out, which caused the machine to malfunction. It went on a violent rampage before Spider-Man swooped into action and shut it down. Several years later, the Living Brain is modified by Dr. Petty's son, and the machine gets clawed hands and the ability to fly around. He built the machine to deal with a bully, and once again, Spider-Man had to step in to control the Living Brain going rogue. The main powers of the Living Brain lie in its analysis abilities and deduction skills. It was built with a durable metal exoskeleton and rotating limbs, and later it was given sharp claws and flight abilities, making it a deadly fighting machine. In one story arc, the Living Brain ended up defeating the Avengers with its intelligence, and it was one of Spider-Man's smartest villains without a doubt.
No!
Tinkerer. An old man is hardly what you would imagine as a dreaded Spider-Man villain, but Tinkerer ensured that all doubts were kept aside when they faced off. He was a man named Phineas Mason who was famously known for his innovative inventions and designs of some really cool weaponry. He got the name Terrible Tinkerer in his business, and he ran an underground shop under the guise of a radio repair store. He also used radios to spy on important state officials to blackmail them, and during his fight against Spider-Man, he was seen getting away in a flying, saucer-looking hovercraft in typical Green Goblin style. He also developed an advanced robot called the Toy, which was used to fight Spider-Man. Besides his direct conflicts with the superhero, he also allied with the likes of Kingpin and helped Mysterio develop his suit. He was associated with a few other supervillains like the Vulture, and later his son, Rick Mason, became an infamous mercenary. The main power of Tinkerer lies in his incredible intelligence and inventions. He specialized in weapons, and although his old age limits his physical capabilities, he makes up for such shortcomings with his deadly devices. Big Man. When you first look at Frederick Foswell, a quiet but dutiful reporter working for Daily Bugle, you wouldn't really imagine a mob boss. However, the man led a secret double life as the Big Man, who was the leader of an infamous group called the Enforcers. In order to maintain his secret, Big Man dressed up in oversized coats and a mask, with giant boots to conceal his real appearance. He tasted some success in the criminal underworld, but his success story was interrupted after he locked horns with Spider-Man. The friendly neighborhood superhero proved to be more than a match for the man, and the entire group of enforcers is captured by the police with Spider-Man's help. After serving time in prison, he was rehired by the Daily Bugle boss, and in gratitude, he intended to work faithfully this time around. By this time, Crime Master and Green Goblin's alliance had wreaked havoc across the city, and Foswell was curious to learn about how Peter Parker was always getting the best photos of Spider-Man. Later, when Kingpin took over as the new crime boss, he wanted to regain his position as the Big Man, but it was too late for Frederick Foswell. He eventually succumbed to a bullet wound, and now his daughter would be up in revenge. Crime Master. There have been quite a few remarkable villains who posed as the Crime Master over time, but the first one to embrace the alias was Nicholas Lewis Sr., aka Lucky Lewis. He was a masked criminal who wanted absolute control of all his crime gangs operating in New York. While Spider-Man naturally became one of his arch rivals, he was also opposed by the likes of Green Goblin, especially after he discovered the real identity of the supervillain to be Norman Osborn. The police was tipped off about his location, and he eventually got killed in the gunfight. His son, Nick Lewis Jr., took up the mantle because he blamed Spider-Man for his father's death. He teamed up with Janice Foswell, the daughter of Big Man, and after accidentally killing her, he turned himself in. Later, the likes of Bennett Brandt also joined the ranks of Crime Master, and once again, his paths led him into fighting Spider-Man alongside many other supervillains. In one of the story arcs, Crime Master teamed up with Green Goblin as well in an uneasy partnership, but they kept betraying each other, and eventually he was killed. This particular supervillain was not really superpowered, but important alliances and control of the underworld made him a potent threat for the web-slinging superhero. Iguana. Iguana was a result of some flawed experiments conducted by Curtis Connors, the biologist who had turned himself into the lizard. While trying to get rid of his condition, he tested a new innovator on an iguana, but the results turned the creature into a deadly mutated form. It had the memories of the lizard and the mutant power, which made it an adversary for both the lizard as well as Spider-Man. However, Lizard and Iguana were quick to form an alliance against the superhero and made life difficult for the web slinger. Finally, Iguana was defeated by Spider-Man, who used the innovator to increase the iguana's powers to infinite proportions. This, in turn, decreased the effect of the lizard, and Curtis Connor's condition was healed. The abundance of powers almost made Iguana explode, and later it turned back to its original harmless form. However, this wasn't the last we saw of Iguana, and he was back to fight Spider-Man at the Central Park Zoo a few years later. He tried hypnotizing the superhero, but failed, causing one more of his failures. The powers of Iguana included extreme strength, sharp claws, a powerful tail, and an almost bulletproof skin. He could also hypnotize people by looking straight into their eyes, but the tactics did not work with Spider-Man. Spencer Smythe. How long does it take for genius scientists to turn into ruthless supervillains in the Marvel Universe? Well, for the likes of Spencer Smythe, the researcher of arachnids and robotics, the transformation came rather quickly when he chose the life of crime to continue his experiments. He developed high-tech robots that were capable of tracking spiders, he was hired to capture Spider-Man. A robot went after the wall-crawling superhero, and Spider-Man barely managed to escape by leaving his suit behind with the robot. This provoked Spencer Smythe even further, and he made his robots more evolved and called them Spider Slayers. However, all his robots had a key flaw, which was exploited by Spider-Man to defeat them every single time. Spencer Smythe had a tragic end to his career after he got exposed to radioactive materials during his experiments. This meant that his death was supposed to be painful, and he was helpless, blaming Spider-Man for his fate. In a last-ditch effort, he handcuffed Spider-Man with Jameson, the man who hired him, and planted a bomb with them which would explode within 24 hours. Unfortunately, he passed away before he could watch his enemies destroyed, and Spider-Man found a way to defuse the bomb. But the legacy of Spencer Smythe wasn't completely gone, and now his son, Alistair Smythe, took over the mantle. Robot Master Gaunt. While Robot Master or Gaunt is regarded as one of the most terrifying Marvel villains of all time, he started off as a scientist named Professor Mendel Storm, who worked for Oscorp Industries. One of his major experiments included the magical chemical that turned Norman Osborn into the Green Goblin. Meanwhile, Norman found out that the professor was embezzling funds and turned him over to the cops. Once he was found out, he wanted revenge and used some lethal robots to try and kill Norman Osborn. Spider-Man stepped in and foiled his plans, and it looked like the man died of a heart attack shortly thereafter. However, he had already planned in advance for his death, and his spirit was transferred to a robotic body double. This became the Robot Master, and in a remarkable storyline, he clashed with Spider-Man, only to be defeated by the superhero. Later, he returned in a cyborg form called the Gaunt, and Osborn tried to believe that he survived the fatal heart attack because of the Green Goblin formula that he invented. Mendel Storm continued in his efforts to kill both Norman and Spider-Man, and he even sent a Sentinel robot for the job. Unfortunately for him, none of his plans succeeded, and he was perceived as one of those supervillains with a lot of potential but very little impact. As a scientist, he was extremely skilled with robotics and chemistry, and as Gaunt, he developed an enhanced physical form that was studied with various defense systems. His head connected to a cyborg body was as creepy as it was powerful, and he introduced further upgrades to his abilities, such as laser projection and the power of flight.
Chill, Blackie. This will be over soon. Maybe you told the wrong guy to chill.
Molten Man. Molten Man might have started his journey as a dreaded nemesis of Spider-Man, but he redeemed himself and refrained from his evil ways with time. He was initially a man named Max Raxton, and his scientific skills were never appreciated at Oscorp, where he was a lab assistant for Spencer Smythe. When the latter invented a new metallic alloy to be in his robotic creations, the Spider Slayers, Mark tried to steal the product and accidentally spilled it over himself. He was initially scarred for his life after his skin turned golden and absorbed the liquid alloy, but soon he discovered that he now had certain superpowers. As Molten Man, he was not just extremely powerful, but also invulnerable to damage. Even Spider-Man's webbing kept slipping off his frictionless metal skin. He could also generate powerful flames which could turn his enemies to ashes. He picked certain criminal activities for monetary gains, and Spider-Man had to step in to stop the criminal from becoming worse. He was imprisoned once, but his cat-and-mouse game with law continued, ensuring further face-offs with the wall-crawling superhero. Over time, Molten Man's condition became worse, and the metallic skin started to consume itself. He tried to find a cure desperately, and finally, during one of their fights, he was knocked into a swimming pool which helped his metallic skin cool down. Although he was taken to a special prison for superpowered criminals, he turned a new leaf after his release. He went on to repent his crimes and even allied with Spider-Man, becoming his trusted friend. Luther. Growing up as a poor scientist, Norton G. Fester was thought of as a crackpot by his colleagues. But his fortunes changed after he discovered a mysterious meteor that had crashed into the Earth. While experimenting on the meteor, he accidentally unleashed a strange gas from the object, and it changed his physical powers immensely. All of a sudden, he developed extreme strength and agility. There have also been instances where he could grow in stature by drawing from high-energy sources, and his powerful, giant leaps made him a fair opponent for Spider-Man. He immediately made the decision that these powers would turn him into an unstoppable criminal and embraced his dark side. He took the name Luther, and he became a notorious robber, gaining wealth and slipping past the cops every time. However, he required more of the meteor to continue and enhance his superpowers, and during one such attempt, he met some resistance from Spider-Man. The friendly neighborhood superhero defeated him in a fascinating duel that took place in a hot air balloon. He went on to face the likes of Nighthawk in Spider-Man quite frequently, but his success story had come to an end.
Can't let you go back out there. Let Krieger and the Tinkerer kill each other.
Prowler. Hobie Brown was an angry young African-American teenager who got into trouble for his temper issues quite often. He was fired from his job and he eventually decided to dress up as a supervillain to steal certain items.